Hi, Cindy and Lori here, and we are at it again.
Hi, Cindy.
It's so exciting. We're ready for our next sew-along, and it's the Vintage Housewife sew-along.
That's right.
So you have your new fabric collection, Vintage Happy 2. It is happy fabric.
Well, I tried to make it with my happy color, so it would be a happy fabrics.
And so many great small prints in this, but we also have some nice big prints as
Yeah,
well.
that's like the orange pill cheater cloth. And we put it in this bag over here.
We loved it so much we put it in a quilted bag. So here's a display of all her beautiful fabrics, but there's other things that you're gonna need for this sew-along. Let's talk about those. Of course, we need our threads,
Right.
matching threads, but vintage trim. You use a lot of vintage trim.
Yes, the large size goes in the binding and then also in the apron. And then we have 4 colors that come on a small spool. That's the small rickrack. And that's what we'll be using in some of the quilt blocks.
So cute. Once you see what it's put in, you're just gonna see how clever Lori is to use her vintage trim. You also need the buttons. These are a collection of all red buttons that you use a lot in the quilt.
Yeah, this is the barn door collection. It just has all different shades of reds.
And then, of course, you need your Vintage Housewife Sew Simple shapes.
Yes, there are 43 templates in this one so that we can make the quilt.
And the quilt, let's look at this quilt. This is how I like to do housework. So much.
But you got to put your apron on.
Yes.
So that's how I designed this quilt, is I did a pieced apron in the center, and then I did blocks all the way around that represent the things that the Vintage Housewife did while she was wearing her apron, because she always wore an apron. And then on the bottom, let's lift this up so you can see.
So the cuteness is in the details. Which block are we working on first?
We're going to do the baking block right here with this cute pink oven right in the top center.
How cute. And if you can't have a pink
Stove
at home, you can have it in your quilt.
That's right.
So you need to download the guide, the sew-along guide. Again, all the details are on Lori's blog week to week, but download the guide on Riley Blake Designs website.
Right. The guide has the cutting and embroidery patterns and things like that, but I give the instructions for each block, on my blog every week.
And it includes, the full schedule, and you can this is a great way to organize, and it just has jam-packed with your cutting instructions and all the details, including the guide for your embroidery.
Yes. There's a place in the back for notes, and we also have this cute clip art.
Downloadable clip art.
So you can decorate the front if you would like to, like I do, and keep organized during the sew-along.
And we're going to have to talk about these another day. Look how cute that is, using your wool. So, okay, let's get started on this block.
Okay, so using the Sew Simple shapes, it tells you in the guide, what to cut your fabric, your sewing interfacing, all of that stuff. But I wanted to show you on this piece right here, where we're making the little casserole that goes in here, you need to take the 2 cut pieces and sew them together, and then press the seam open, and then you can lay your Sew Simple shape that's traced on here and sew it so that when you turn it, it looks like this.
Oh, isn't that clever? And then you're going to add another piece on top of that.
Yeah, as we lay it out. But this is just, sometimes I have you piece 2 pieces together before you sew the Sew Simple shape instead of just doing one. So I have all of the pieces, most of them, prepared here. I saved 2 out so that I could show you how I trim and clip the cleavages. So after you've sewn your shape, and when you sew, you don't back stitch, you just kind of over sew where you started by about a 1/2 inch or an inch, and that sets your stitches and makes it a little less bulky. If you were to back stitch, it might be a little bit more bulky. And so you can trim 1/4 of an inch, an 1/8 of an inch, whatever, it doesn't really matter. But I just, trim like a scant 1/4 of an inch all the way around my shape. It's much easier to cut these into rectangles. That's why I have you cut them into rectangles and squares and then sew. and then trim after than it would be to have you cut this shape out and then try to
It would
sew
be
without
really
it shifting.
difficult,
Yeah.
yes.
So once you get to that point, we've got two little cleavage or Y areas that you need to clip to before you turn it. So what I do is I just do one clip all the way to my thread, but not into or past my thread, because you don't want to go past there. So now that will lie flat when you turn it right side out. So what I do when I need to cut a little X back here to turn, you can use your seam ripper, you can take your scissors, and I usually just do one little clip, and then that allows me to get my scissors in there. And with this long piece, I might just clip about halfway down, just so that it can be turned. And then you're going to use your little clover tool to shape it. Do you want to turn that one?
Yes, I do.
And then I'm going to show you how I do a circle. So it's the same thing with the circle. I just trim around it. Then you can either pull it out, or you can just take your seam ripper and make sure you're not going into the fabric, but just the interfacing, and do a little cut there, and then finish your X. You don't really need it great big. You don't want to clip all the way to your edges. And then I just turn it inside out, right side out. And then I'm going to use my little tool to shape it. And I usually just do with these smaller pieces like 1/2 at a time, and then that allows me room to get into the other half. So you only have to turn it to where it looks like that, and then this is where the tool comes in handy. And what I do is I have my fabric here and my interfacing facing me, and I just kind of roll the tip of this onto the fabric, not on the interfacing, and I'm gently pushing as I'm turning the circle. If you push too hard, of course, you're going to poke a hole. And so you just kind of want to gently turn it. And then sometimes you'll get an area like from here to here, you can see 2 points sticking out. Then I'll go take my little point and just kind of work it in between those two. And because it's 100% cotton, it has a little give to it, and you can actually push that out a little bit without tearing it. And so once I get it shaped to that point, then all I do is just give it a quick press. And it doesn't need to be completely flat. You know, as you sew it down, that'll be fine. So now Cindy's got that one all turned and shaped. So for a long piece like this, I would just press 1/2 at a time. Like, just lay it here. Do a quick press. Turn it over. Make sure the interfacing is all turned under. And give it a quick press. And I usually just leave it to sit there for just a minute to cool off. And till that's ready to go. So on this block, there's just one little portion that has embroidery on it, and it's the circle right here. And it's just the 2 little hands on the clock.
And that would be in the book, and you use right there.
Yeah, so here's the light box under here, under the bags and things like that. And you can use your the Easy Trace light box to trace all of these embroidery patterns. I also have the cords. Even though you don't embroider the cords, I have that pattern there so that you can trace that on, so that you know where to place your small rickrack, you know, so that you don't have to guess. So I just trace that on and then do a quick satin stitch, you know, right here. And then after I do the satin stitch, I'll add a tiny little button, the tiniest one from this package.
Right on there.
Yeah. So speaking of the buttons, let's talk about that right now. I know on this block right here, this is ready for applique, but I did sew the buttons on because I wanted you to see their placement. But I normally put the buttons on after the block is all finished and squared up, because it's hard to put your ruler on there to square it up on top of buttons. Or if your quilter wants them off completely before you quilt it, then you would just put them on after it's quilted. So it really is preference. You can do it before or after, whatever you'd like to do. I usually have my buttons on first before the quilting happens, because my quilter does custom quilting and she'll just go around them. So hopefully that answers your questions about the buttons. So all of these pieces are ready to go, and here's my little trims for my bias tape. But let me show you, these are already pressed under and ready to go, but let me show you how I run mine through the maker. So let me get this out of the way.
Right here.
I can just set it down here, I think.
And while you're getting ready, we do have a new size on your design boards.
That's right, this is the medium size. Yeah,
So this is a really nice size.
yeah, we've had large and small, now we have medium. So this is I find myself using this size quite a bit when I'm laying out these blocks.
Great size.
So this is the 1/2 inch maker. It's yellow, it's clover, it has a number 12 on it. This is the yellow, and then for the 1/2 inch, and you cut these 1 inch wide, but it tells you all of the cutting in the guide. But I just want to show you how I run this through the maker. So what I do is I'll take one end and I'll trim a point like that so that I can, make it through there, thread it through there. But first, I like to have a spray bottle, and I like to have a little bit of starch in it so that it kind of keeps it stiff. So I spray it. I don't really saturate it real good, but I do want it to have starch in it for sure, and so that it will keep its shape. On the point, I dry that first, because I kind of want that stiff. That helps it thread through there. So once I've got that point, I just thread it through the top like this until that point comes out. If you have a hard time getting that point out, you could stick a pin down in there and push it out. But usually if you trim it to a point, you don't. Now, in the instructions, it tells you to keep this up. That's why they have this little puller here too. But I like to have mine down so that you can see the finished side and that you can see the printing of this on the top. And the reason I do that is because I like to press it down as it comes out so that it's not getting a little crease in it. So what I do is I just put the iron right next to it, and I slowly follow along as I'm pulling this out. I just follow the iron. You have to have a really hot iron. This happens to be a vintage iron. It's very hot. I collect vintage irons. I use them all the time, and I never use them past the medium setting, because every time I put them past the medium, it scorches every time. So they're very, very hot. So if you're looking for a vintage iron, you need to make sure that you find one that actually has a heat setting on it. Some of them don't. Those, if you can't turn it down, yeah, you'll scorch. Within the first 5 minutes, you'll scorch whatever you're ironing. So I do that, and I just leave it to cool for a minute. And then when I'm ready to put it in here into my quilt, I'll just press them under. And I'll always tell you the ends under. I'll always tell you in my blog how long you have to do these. These happen to be 6 inches. This is for the handle on the oven and the handle on the drawer on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so now we've got these pieces, and I'll show you how I lay things out. I'm going to put these buttons aside. So I'm just going to transfer this here for a minute so I can show you. So you've got a nice bigger background. I have you cut them 14 inches, and then you're going to trim it down using the 12.5-inch trim it ruler.
And those are my very favorite.
Yeah, and it's really nice after you
trim it rulers. They're just fantastic.
Thanks, Cindy. The lines make it so nice. So after this one, I've already trimmed down. So I hope you can kind of see the edges, but it helps. You can see that fits right in these lines, this stove in here, and you can just kind of
And
tell
again, you
if you're
can just
straight.
see
There's a
your
1
seam
inch
allowance.
on here, and then this represents the 1/4 inch after you sew the block into the quilt. So you can see within this window what your block is going to look like. So there's a 1/2 inch difference from here, and there's a 1/2 inch difference from the bottom of the legs. And
Perfectly
this ends
centered.
up being,
Yeah.
and so
Great
that really helps a lot. So you've got your 14-inch piece right here. You take your oven and you lay it sideways. I'm just going to set these here to the side. That's going to end up going there. But I start with my top piece first. And I always have this little ruler here. I always have a ruler next to me that will at least go across, and a small one that I can use little measurements. So because you have it on a 14-inch, if you measure down, this happens to be 1.5 inches wide. If you measure down 1.5 inches, that's where you want this top piece to be. And so what I do is I grab my pins.
The
Here, let's set
cutest
these
little
over here.
pin holder I've ever
Yeah,
seen.
this is a little vintage mixer.
Like, seriously, look at that.
I keep my scissors in here. I keep,
And your new little stork scissors are coming out soon. They're so
Yes,
cute.
in fact, I think they just hit the warehouse yesterday,
did they?
so they're here. Okay, so what I do is I just stick a few pins in so that you can kind of start laying things out. Now, for this piece, you want this to overlap it, 1/4 of an inch, 1/8 of an inch. And then I like to use my pins. These are my applique pins, the pretty pin applique pins. They're the ones that have all the little colored heads. They seem to be just the right strength and durability and sharpness to do what I need for this. Now I can see right here, this is why I like to pin first before I glue. See how there's more that hangs over on this side than this side? So I simply just take the pins out, shift it over, so that I can change it before I glue things down.
That's what makes these design boards so nice.
Yes, I love the design. You have to have the design board or something that you can pin into. And then, let's see, where's the one I marked? Anyway, that's what you would put there. You just want to make sure that you have enough room, between there to stick that. You don't want to overlap it so much.
Would you
that you don't have
ever
enough
do
room.
the embroidery before you
Yes,
put it on
I do the
here?
embroidery first, but I'm just showing you how to lay it out. But on these little pieces right here, I always do the embroidery first. And then you kind of want to end up, so you can look at the picture, but this is pretty much centered
Yeah.
within the block. And so what I do with that, I lay it down to where I think it's about centered, and then I make sure, okay, that measures 1.5 inches on that side, it measures 1.5 inches on that side. I did pretty good. So, and I'll still, before I glue it, I'll just stick a few pins in there just to keep it where it needs to go. Then I'm going to add the little casserole that's in the oven. It could be a pie, I don't know.
What's in this
This is
casserole?
like a Pyrex, and it's like, I don't know, it's like a chicken casserole or something.
I'm getting hungry. It's lunchtime.
Whatever the vintage housewife wants to make for dinner that day. Or for luncheon, maybe it's for a quilting bee or something.
Maybe so.
So once these are pinned down, this is where I take this little bias strip right here, and it goes right across the seam.
Just
And
tucks
so
right under the side.
I just tuck it under the edges, and if you don't use the pins, it becomes kind of fiddly, you know what I mean? But once you stick that pin in there, it's going to stay in its place.
I've just got permagran watching this.
See?
I think it's so cute. So dang cute.
Thank you. And then, let's see, I have a little piece, here it is. So this tiny little one, I pressed the edges under and glued it first with the Sue glue, just so it was easier to handle. And all you're going to do is just tuck that under in the center for the lid. And it just kind of sticks up like that.
So adorable.
And then you've got 2 of these strips for the trim.
That's what makes your sew along so fun. You're just creating these vintage, adorable mini scenes, and
Thanks.
it makes it so fun to sew
It
along.
is fun for me. It's like playing, you know.
Yes, it's like playing house.
It's sort
a
of
little
like
bit.
it's sort of like paper dolls, even though
Yeah.
these aren't people, you know. It's just
Yeah.
like you're building layers. So I just pin that on there. I want to make sure that I leave room for this one and center that one. I think that needs to be 2 inches, so I'll scooch that over. Let me stick a pin in here so I can lift it a little and show you. What's fun about the pins is it's just kind of like a trial run. You're kind of like auditioning it. And see, there's the bottom part. Now I need to just put this trim up here about the same distance apart from the top.
Now this one you have on that one. So
Yes.
I think you need to move that.
Oh yeah, you're right. This needs to come at the top because I need the, You're right. I have to be able to
refer.
open the oven to get the casserole out.
This just makes me want to be domestic. I'm gonna go home and make a casserole tonight. I haven't made a casserole in years.
You can pretend you're a vintage housewife.
Yes, I can pretend.
Okay, so this is where you place that, and again, I'm just doing this kind of, you know, a quick overall. Okay, have I missed any pieces? Oh, yes, the legs. Okay, so the legs of the oven are this little shape right here that we use for other things in the quilt, but I like to double things up if I can. So
That is going
on this,
to be.
I'm just going to tuck half of it underneath there until the point fits there.
Okay, so it's
See what
kind
I
of
mean? So it-
angled on its
yeah.
side. Oh, clever.
Yeah.
Very clever.
And then I'll just pin those there. Now, once I get everything pinned and how I like it, then that's when I take the glue. And do you want to hold this up just for a second? I'm not going to actually glue, but that's what I do. I just pick this up and kind of stick a few drops under there
So it
while the
doesn't
pins are
shift.
still in,
At all.
so that it does not shift. And then once it's, you know, the glue is dry, 10, 15 minutes, then I just take my pins out and I'm ready for applique. So on this block, you want to make sure that it's about 11 inches from here to the tip. But see how, because we've cut these bigger, we shouldn't have a problem at all with that growing. The width of the stove isn't going to be a problem because you can't make that any wider than it is, but you can make your pieces grow taller. So that's why it's really nice to just, before you glue everything down, even though the pins are in there, I still like to just kind of hold the ruler on there and make sure, oh yeah, I've got space around and I'm not going to cut any of my appliques off. So that's the process that I do. I go ahead and applique and then I'll trim it up after and we can go on to the next block.
Well, I love this. I love this quilt. You've done it again.
Thank you, Cindy.
And join us for January 27th for the beginning of the sew along, and come sew along with us.
See you there.